Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Books, Gurrs, and Purrs. My name's Leslie, and today our book chat is going to be about Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin. Bear with me. My whole goal, or I guess one of my goals for 2023 is to do just this. Read a book, write down my thoughts, create these videos, have a little book chat. But in the month of February, I ended up reading so many books by James Baldwin that were just so engaging and I just couldn't put down that I wasn't creating video segments like right after I read a book. Oh my god, that's my rice cooker. Let me get that. Alright, I'm sorry about that. I had to reset. Alright, so where do I start? I'll just say that, yeah, I love James Baldwin's writing. I blasted through a bunch of his work in the month of February and gave myself a little bit of burnout because I was just juggling a lot. But you know what? It was worth it. So where do I start? Alright, so I'll just go over a synopsis real quick and say that Go Tell It on the Mountain is about a 14-year-old boy. He wakes up, it's his 14th birthday, and he wakes up angry and feels like this is going to be another birthday where he's not celebrated but forgotten. What we learn from the main character Jean is that not only does he have a tumultuous relationship with his father, but he's grappling with himself, with his own sexuality, and actually with any type of sexual feelings at all. He's brought up in a religious household. I want to say Protestant, I think. And the way the book is written itself is like in this biblical vernacular that's so strongly written. It's as though you could rip a chapter from the Bible and this would be it. Go Tell It on the Mountain. I absolutely love this book. And the thing is, although the synopsis stops there, there's so much more to the story. For instance, like the first third of the book is John's perspective, but then there's another chapter and it's from, oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember. Oh, it focuses on the mom's character, which is the second part. And then there's a third part that focuses on another character's point of view. And there's also a chapter from an aunt. And by the end, the last part is going back to John. And so I don't know how else that would have been added to the synopsis, but I would have liked if the synopsis kind of included that it's not just from the son's point of view. And also, there's something else going on with the father character. Although the relationship with John, the main character, is tumultuous, it just seems like the father has so much like hatred towards his son that definitely feels unwarranted. And I couldn't tell if it's because maybe he has an understanding of his son's own sexuality before he understands it, or if something else is going on. I didn't want to forget to mention a couple other themes that are going on, so I'm gonna look at my phone. The story also explores gender roles, violence against women, police brutality, religious pressures, religious hypocrisy, colorism, racism, and self-discovery. And I'll just give you one example before I go into like my spoiler talk. But what I did appreciate is that there's a moment, and it's very brief. It doesn't take up a lot of time or space in the book, but the character John stops by the library and decides, I'm trying to remember, not to go in because he doesn't want to be discriminated against. He doesn't want to have to deal with people treating him like he doesn't belong there. And this is something that is echoed in Kelly Fajardo's Anstein's book, Woman of Light, because her main character, Luce, in that book goes through exactly that. And I appreciated this example in James Baldwin's book so much because sometimes when a conversation happens about, let's say, institutional racism or like systemic racism, like the bigger conversations are always like on this governmental level or whatever is at the forefront, whether it be like dealing with the police or laws, legislation in place. But what I liked about this example is that it specifically has to do with the library, someplace where people you think would feel safe, but it's just another institution that is run by humans, and unfortunately is somewhere where John, the character, and people in real life are discriminated against. And I think it's just like really important to kind of see like all those little moments that happen in everyday life, and how John knows that it's just someplace he doesn't want to go. So as unfortunate as that is, or like hard to hear, it's still like important, and I'm glad that the author put it into the narrative, because this is an author writing it. And I mean, this is an author that just writes like such incredible prose. I mean, his imagery is incredible. The way that the author sucks me in as a reader is really through his imagery, and makes me feel like I'm dropped right there into the scenes. And so I wonder if that moment about those thoughts about how the character John doesn't want to deal with the library is maybe something that the author has gone through, and it's just something that was on my mind. But that'll be the end of my non-spoiler talk about that. The rest is going to be like a spoiler chat. I am going to have to refer to my notes because I don't think I'll stay on track to whatever I need to talk about. So bear with me. Alright, I'm trying to remember. So the synopsis, everything I talked about is mainly in the first part. The second part of the book takes place from the aunt's perspective, Aunt Florence. And what we learn about Aunt Florence is that she was overshadowed by her brother. Her brother was revered, and I think that parallels what John goes through. Even though John is the oldest of several kids, it's actually his younger brother that's revered, and actually his younger brother has taken the name of his father. So it's interesting that we realize that John's father didn't think that his name wasn't good enough to pass on to John, but he passed it on to his second child. So that's a tip-off that something is not right with the relationship, beyond everything we hear about how John is treated. What I like about this is that we really get to understand like the dynamics of Florence and John. And Florence has such a distaste for how her family is, and also just having to deal with being a woman where she grew up, and how she's treated, so much so that she's a character that actually moves to Harlem in the first place just to get away from her family. But in doing so, she leaves behind a really good friend of hers. And from there, that's where the third part kicks in, and that's from Gabriel's point of view, we are going back to the past and learning about Gabriel's life. And when I read this section about Gabriel, at no point in this entire book do I feel any, I don't know, empathy for Gabriel. I thought maybe that if I read from the other characters, that I would maybe feel differently about the choices that they made later on in life, or how Gabriel treats John. But it was quite the opposite. I think I think I grew like more angry at the character of Gabriel. So we do learn is Florence leaves. Gabriel develops a problem with alcohol, and over time cleans up himself. He becomes like a born again Christian, and he over time is known for his sermons as a pastor. And so actually the aunt's friend that she leaves behind, Gabriel eventually marries her. But what frustrates me in this book is that he doesn't marry her for love. He just marries her because he feels like it's the right thing to do, and in a way he thinks he's saving Deborah, the woman that he marries. When you're reading this book, I forgot to mention at the beginning, I always put a notice in my details to look up the trigger warnings before you read any books for my selection. But I'll just say right now I'm gonna have to talk about some things, so if you're gonna go any further, just make sure you look up trigger warnings. When it comes to Deborah, who was Gabriel's first wife, she was assaulted. I won't go into details, but from a very young age. And because of how society views women, locked into all the religious baggage, she's treated like in a way where she's ostracized, even though she was forced to do something that she didn't want to do. I mean, just really brutalized. And it's sad to realize that throughout the book, there just seems to be characters that are living in a world where there's racism and colorism within their community, but then church should be like the safe haven, and it's not that. That's what's so, I think, wild about James Baldwin writing this book, because I think the intention is that church should be a safe place, and there's all these things that are going on outside of church that the book explores. And so the intention is that there's a community of people, black people in Harlem, that should be able to go to church and feel like it's a safe space, but it seems like it's not at the same time. And that was interesting that the author put that in, because as I'm reading it, I think I just felt like more angry for the characters, and Deborah would be one of them. So Gabriel marries Deborah. For whatever reason, she can't have children. And Gabriel definitely has this like savior complex. He thinks socially that he's saving Deborah, because now that he's married her, people in the congregation will then accept her. And I also think that in his head he thinks that he's like supporting her. Yeah, it's a lot. So I'll just put a pin in that, because I just keep on thinking in this book where he has this like need to save others, and it just seems kind of like problematic. On another note, when we flip between characters like Deborah or Florence, there's this thing that's going on within the family and their own community about like how the female characters will bleach their skin, and it's put in there so casually, and I think it adds to what's so terrible about that is how like accepted it is, and that's also just rooted from white supremacy, right? And like how people are treated and meant to feel like if you don't look a certain way, then you're not beautiful. But it's done in such a like a casual way. I don't know how else to put it. That even makes it even more jarring, I guess. So there's that, and then it switches off to Elizabeth's point of view, and that would be John's mother. Oh no, before I go into that, I have to tell you that I liked Gabriel less and less, because even though he marries Deborah, there's someone at his job that he ends up having an affair with. But I feel like he treats her the same way. It's like, oh, I'm with my wife. In his eyes, she's not pretty. And she's just serving like his purpose. And then he's sleeping with this other person. Feels bad about it. And then the person that he sleeps with ends up getting pregnant. And so then he like takes money that his wife keeps track of and gives it to this other woman and says, take the money, I never want to see you again. And so this woman he has an affair with feels like a bit stuck and she doesn't know what to do. So she listens to him, she takes off, and eventually where she goes, she ends up dying, and so does the baby, I think. Oh no, that's a lie. He doesn't die. But like a family member, not his family, the one that he had an affair with, her family takes in the baby. And this whole time, this is what gets to me is how big his ego is, because throughout his life, he sees this person that is his kid that apparently knows nothing about him, but he treats his wife like she's dumb, like she's not going to know what happened the whole time. And it's his level of like ego and self-righteousness that gets me so angry. And so his wife at some point confronts him after his mistress dies, for lack of a better word. And I felt like his wife in the past was just such a gentle, patient person that really just went through the ringer. And I even feel bad that she was even married to this person. But I felt like society made her feel so bad about herself, as if she's someone to be unwanted. And that's how she ended up with Gabriel. So this whole time, actually, Deborah is corresponding with Gabriel's brother. Gabriel's sister, Florence, who had taken off. And so Florence knows all the tea. She knows what's been going on. She knows that her brother has like an illegitimate child and what happened to the mistress. And so at some point, Gabriel's wife, Deborah, dies, which we learned really early on she died. We just didn't know the background. And so Gabriel, at some point, leaves where he lives and settles down somewhere close to where his sister lives in Harlem. And that's how he meets John's mother. And then you realize that John is already born and that John isn't his child. And you have an understanding of that's why he's so mean to him. But it still doesn't pan out for me because he's so mean. Gabriel is so mean to his stepson that he's known since he was a baby, and it just doesn't make any sense to me, because he actually married a woman knowing that she had another child and still judges him. But he is also the person that cheated on his first wife and has an illegitimate child. It's just like, he is someone that committed adultery and bore a child and doesn't want anything to do with that child. But now with his second wife, who didn't cheat on anyone, she just had a child with someone that she loved, and her boyfriend had passed away. And so I just can't wrap around my head how much hatred Gabriel has for John, when it's like he's known the whole time that this is something that he married into. It just got me so angry. It's like, if you marry someone and they have kids, I just feel like you should accept them like your own kids. It's very strange that he's that cruel, especially since he's known him basically his whole life. So I don't understand that at all. And I think that's another part that just made me dislike Gabriel more. And also through John's mother, I know I kind of summed it up kind of short, but she did love someone, and he died, but he died, if I remember, like a brutal death, and it has to do with being framed by the police, dying because he would not let himself be framed. And so you really get an example of like police brutality, corruption, the lack of any care for her partner. It's very heavy. There's so much going on in this book, but it fits well, and at no point do you feel like, well, this whole story should have been a separate book, you know. It's just the constant hardship that people are faced with. And so I felt a lot for characters like Florence, or for Deborah, or for, oh my gosh, what's her name? Elizabeth, John's mom. But I just didn't have any type of empathy for the character of Gabriel, and that's like something maybe I need to like think a lot more about, because yeah, it's just really frustrating. Oh, and one more thing that I wanted to bring up was Gabriel, once again, when he marries his second wife, I felt like he was once again like using the savior complex with his second wife. I mean, she could have married anyone else, she could have, but he offered to marry her. And once again, I didn't think it was coming from a place of, I love this person, we're a good fit. It was once again him thinking that he's a vessel for God, and that he's helping and saving this woman. So I just find it interesting that he's so interested in saving these other female characters in his life, like his first and second wife. And I wish he would just like reflect more internally, because it seems like he is doing the saviorism thing, but then he's also like, I'm gonna cheat on my first wife, or I'm gonna treat my stepson like trash. It's just, and to continuously like punish him in a way for something that's out of John's control. So that was just a whole cycle of these like generations of things that are going on that didn't make me feel any type of empathy for Gabriel. And I still feel that way. It's been some time. This is like the first book I read of James Baldwin. I love this book, but I just could not tap into any type of feelings for the father figure. And I don't know if that's intentional or if that's wrong on my part. I'm definitely going to have to look into some interviews with James Baldwin about this book and see if like that was the intent. I don't know. There's a lot going on. And with the end of the book, John has this very like spiritual experience of him being saved in the spirit, I guess. I don't know if I'm using the terminology right, but he just has this moment where he has this very spiritual experience. And I want to say the way that his stepfather sees that moment, it seems like the church, or the way that the author is writing it, it's just almost like this hierarchical thing that John is the one that has this spiritual experience, but it's not Gabriel's biological son. And so it just seems like he puts so much stock in his biological son, once again creating that division, right, of not really thinking much about his son John. And also it's interesting that John has this spiritual experience all the while grappling with his sexuality and everything else that's going on in his family and in society. And so John, in his father's eyes and in religion, is considered like the sinner, but he is the one that's spiritually saved. So I thought that was really like profound, but there's this lot going on that kind of almost like taints that experience because I'm so frustrated with the father Gabriel. Another thing is that Gabriel's sister, Florence, I believe, confronts her brother and says basically that she's going to give a letter to the second wife and basically tell the truth about how he treated his first wife, basically airing out all his dirty laundry. And I think this comes from a place of her seeing how her brother treats his own family, and she's just kind of like sick of it. And I don't know how to feel about that because it's not like she has a conversation. It's just a letter. And it almost feels like this really gossipy narrative that I don't know how to feel about it. Which will lead me to like one minor critique that I have of this book, which is a juggernaut. It's really, I love this book. But I would say that there are some moments where there's a transition or a lack thereof of a transition from one character to the next within a chapter. And so sometimes that would throw me off before actually realizing what character I'm reading from. It doesn't happen often, but it's definitely an issue I had with the book. But beyond that, I love this book. I'm glad I read it. I appreciated all the different like characters' perspective and how all these different elements lead up and are put on the next generation. I thought that was really like important to explore. Yeah, and I still don't know how to feel about Gabriel at the end, or you know, I'm well aware that I don't like his character. I just want to reflect more on why the author wrote that, basically. But yeah, that's everything for my spoiler talk. I hope I didn't miss anything. Thank you for your patience. I'll be rolling out all my February reads of James Baldwin's work throughout. I'll try to spread it out instead of bombarding you. Thank you so much for watching, and I guess I'll see you later.